There's a story Quentin Tarantino tells about a night that changed everything for him. He had no film degree, no connections, no money. And one night he stayed up until the morning with a pen and a paper. He wrote down everything he was doing wrong with his life. No excuses. He didn't soften it up. It was just the truth on paper. And then he spent the last 2 hours figuring out how to change it. And instead of going to sleep and forgetting about it, he actually did it. That one night started a chain of events that eventually led to Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Kill Bill, Inglourious Bastards, and one of the most influential careers in the history of film. Now, before he was a director, before he ever stepped on a set, Tarantino was a writer. Writing is what got him out of that video store. Writing is how he built everything. Today, we're going to talk about how he taught himself, how he writes, the tools he uses. By the end of this, you'll see how one person used writing and deep thinking to completely redirect the course of his life. This is Modernote, where we learn from innovators on how they think and do their work. And we look at the process that makes them successful so we can apply those lessons to our work. All right, let's get into it. Quentin Tarantino was born in Knoxville, Tennessee. His mother, Connie McHugh, was 16 when she had him. She was a nursing student, and his father, Tony Tarantino, was 21, a law student. They split before Quentin was born. Then, in 1966, the family moved to Los Angeles, and they settled in Torrance, which is in the South Bay. His mother remarried a guy named Curtis, and I might butcher his name, apologies, Zestopel. Now, Curtis played a big role in Quentin's early exposure to film. He took him to the movies constantly. So Quentin saw films like MASH when he was 8. He watched Carnal Knowledge, Deliverance, all of these intense films at a very young age. His grandmother took him to see John Wayne movies. So from the very beginning, film was shaping his life. Now, school was a different story. He hated it. The only subject that he was drawn to was history. He said, history was cool and I did well there because it was kind of like the movies. He dropped out of high school at the age of 15, and interestingly, his mother let him do that. Instead of going to another school, he enrolled full-time in acting classes at the James Best Theater Company. At 15, he's done with traditional education. He didn't get a diploma and didn't get a degree and no plan to go to college. All he's doing at this point is taking acting classes and watching movies. Picture this, if you were to see a kid at 15 who dropped out of school, probably be thinking, yeah, this kid's going nowhere. But something else was happening that no one noticed at the time. In 1985, Tarantino got a job at a place called Video Archives. It was a video rental store, and it was located in Manhattan Beach, California. And this is where his real education started. So Video Archives wasn't your typical video store because the people who worked there were all obsessed with film. They didn't just rent movies, they argued about them for hours. Tarantino's coworker, Roger Avery, described it like this. He said it was less of a video store, more of a film school. They'd have these intense 8-hour arguments about cinema. The store did was give him a place to sharpen his thinking, to test his opinions, to debate and defend his ideas out loud every single day. He worked at the video store for about 5 years. Now, think about that. 5 years of watching, discussing, recommending, and analyzing movies 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Customers would come in and ask for recommendations, and Tarantino would talk to them about what they liked, what they'd seen, and then he would steer them towards something they hadn't even heard of. He was testing his own knowledge every day. He was learning what works for different people, what resonates, and what surprises others. He and Avery would recommend films to each other and then go argue about them afterward. They would go back and forth for hours, like sparring. You had to defend your position, you had to explain why a scene worked or it didn't work, and it sharpens your thinking in a way that watching a movie alone simply doesn't. Here's a fun fact. When the store closed eventually in 1995, Quentin Tarantino bought the entire inventory, every single tape, every box. He rebuilt the collection in his own house, and that's how much it meant to him. He later started a podcast in 2022 called the Video Archives Podcast, where he and Avery go back to those same conversations, They pick a film, they break it down, they argue. Same energy, same format, all happening, decades later. Around 1985, while he was working at Video Archives, Tarantino started studying with an acting teacher named Alan Garfield. And so this is where the writing enters the picture. In Garfield's class, students would recreate movie scenes from memory. They would perform the scenes without the actual scripts. When Tarantino couldn't remember the exact lines, he would make them up, and he would improvise his own dialogue on the spot. One of his classmates compared this improvised dialogue to the work of Paddy Chayefsky, who wrote Network and Marty. That comparison is significant. Chayefsky was known for dialogue that sounded completely natural, like real people talking. And here's Tarantino, a kid with no writing training, creating dialogue that made people think of one of the best screenwriters in American history. That feedback mattered. It told him something. It told him he could write. So he started. He began with what was called rambling, uncharted monologues. No structure, no story, just characters talking. And if you think about his films, this makes total sense because his movies are built on dialogue. They typically have long conversations. They also go into tangents. And then characters go off on things that seem unrelated, but then reveal exactly who they are. And that skill started here in the acting class, improvising lines he couldn't remember. By 1990, Tarantino left Video Archives. He got a job at a small production company called Cinetel. It wasn't a glamorous position, but it connected him to the industry in a real way. Around this time, he met with a producer named Lawrence Bender. Bender told him to write a feature screenplay, something that he could actually shoot. Tarantino had already written a script called True Romance. Through a connection at Cinetel, the script reached director Tony Scott. Scott wanted to make it. The script sold for $50,000, which was the Writers Guild minimum at the time. Quentin also wrote Natural Born Killers in November of 1990, and that script eventually sold to Oliver Stone, who rewrote the whole thing significantly. Tarantino was not happy about the changes, but the sale gave him a second paycheck. And here's the part that changed everything. Tarantino took the money from True Romance and used it to fund his own movie. He didn't buy a car. He didn't move into a nice apartment. He took the $50,000 and wrote a script that he could direct himself. And that script was Reservoir Dogs. Tarantino wrote Reservoir Dogs in 3.5 weeks. Lawrence Bender encouraged him to keep it small, something that they could shoot on a low budget. The original plan was to make it for $30,000 on a 16mm black and white film. But then something happened. Bender gave the script to an acting teacher. The acting teacher's wife gave it to Harvey Keitel. Keitel read it and wanted in, but not just as an actor. He signed on as co-producer and helped raise money. With Keitel attached, the budget jumped to $1.5 million. The film was workshopped at the Sundance Institute in 1991. It screened at the Sundance Film Festival in January 1992, and it was a hit. Empire magazine later called it the greatest independent film of all time. This is the moment a high school dropout who worked at a video store just made a film that the entire industry was paying attention to. And it all started with writing. He wrote True Romance, he made some money. And then he wrote Reservoir Dogs to direct the movie. Now, the point that I want to make here is that writing is the engine. Writing made it happen. After Reservoir Dogs, studios came calling. They offered him big projects. He turned them all down. Instead, he went to Amsterdam with a notebook. After making a film that every studio wanted a piece of, Tarantino chose to disappear. He went to Amsterdam and he sat down to write. And what did he write? He wrote Pulp Fiction. Tarantino writes all of his drafts in longhand. No computer, no software. He simply uses a pen and paper. He said, "I can't write poetry on my computer, man." And he means it. Every word starts on the page, written by hand. And his process works like this. He writes what he calls a vomit draft. That's his term. It means he pours everything out without stopping to plan, without outlining a plot twist, without mapping the structure. He just writes. He lets the characters talk. He follows wherever they go. And he said something that I find very honest. He said, "I almost feel like a fraud for taking credit for writing dialogue because it's the characters that are doing it. To me, it's very connected to the characters' improv with me playing all the characters." Think about that. He sees himself as an actor inhabiting each character one at a time, letting them speak. He doesn't plot out what they say. He puts them in a situation and listens. When he was writing Jackie Brown, he said, "I've been living in Ordell for a year now." He was inside the character that long. And this is where his acting paid off. Remember, he spent years studying acting before he ever wrote a script. He learned how dialogue feels from the inside. He knows what it's like to deliver a line that doesn't work. So when he writes, he's performing every part in his head. He knows what sounds natural and what sounds forced because he's been on the other side of it. You could see this in his most famous scenes, the tipping conversation at the beginning of Reservoir Dogs, the foot massage debate in Pulp Fiction, the Sicilian monologue in True Romance. The scenes seem like characters are going off topic, but every word is doing work. He said, "I have no problem relying on dialogue. It's one of the reasons I can direct my material better than anyone else, because I have a confidence in my material that no one else would." That confidence comes from the process. He wrote it by hand, he lived inside the characters, and here's the other part of his process that I think is awesome. After the handwritten draft is done, he types it up on a 1987 Smith Corona word processor. And this is kind of a typewriter computer hybrid. And the crazier part is that he types with one finger. A whole screenplay with one finger. He's described this as a long, slow process. But that's the point. He said, when you've got this giant handwritten manuscript and you're typing it up with one finger, if this isn't Shakespeare, it could be cut off. If I don't want to type it up, if I'm dreading it, then it means I don't love it. The slow typing becomes its own editing filter. If a scene feels boring, it's probably going to be boring to watch. The friction is built into the process, and it's done on purpose. He doesn't fight it. He decides to use it. So Pulp Fiction premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in May 1994, and the budget for that movie was $8.5 million, and it won the Palme d'Or, the top prize. Pulp Fiction became one of the most influential films of the 1990s. It's one of the films that had the most impact on me personally, and the other one would be Reservoir Dogs. When I first saw Reservoir Dogs, I was completely blown away. Pulp Fiction changed how people thought about screenplay structure, about dialogue, about what a movie could be, and all of it was written by hand, on paper, in Amsterdam, by this guy who didn't even finish high school. Amazing. So if you watch Pulp Fiction, you notice that the film jumps around, and it shows events out of order, and the characters you think are dead show up alive in the next scene. A character who dies in the middle of the film is walking around in the final scene. Tarantino didn't plan this structure on a whiteboard. He discovered it through writing. He said that the time he's in the middle of the story, it becomes something completely different than what he imagined before he started. The structure of Pulp Fiction came from following the characters and then rearranging the pieces until they created the right feeling. So this is huge. He didn't outline his way into a non-linear film. He wrote it on the way there. And so the writing process produced the innovation, and it changed how an entire generation of filmmakers thought about story structure. All right, I feel like I've been talking way too fast, so I'm going to slow down a little bit. Tarantino's story isn't just about making movies. It's about what happens when someone uses writing as a tool for thinking. And Tarantino didn't go to film school. He didn't take writing classes. He learned by watching movies and by writing consistently. And it reminds me of, I just watched the interview of Seth Godin recently, and he's a master when it comes to marketing. And the question that he was asked was something to the effect of, what do you have to say about authenticity today and this year, 2026? Right now, as I'm recording this, it's April 2026. And it's spot on what Seth said. He says, authenticity is complete BS. What he said is, it's not about authenticity. You don't want to be 100% your authentic self to your audience or to a customer, right? Because what if you're frustrated? What if you're, ticked off that day? You don't want to show that you're frustrated. You want to make the customer feel better. Instead of thinking of authenticity, you have to have consistency. A well-loved and respected brand is consistent. not necessarily authentic. So that's something to think about. Back to Quentin. He wrote monologues in acting class. He wrote scripts that no one asked for. He wrote Reservoir Dogs before anyone would fund it. Every draft forced him to sit down with the characters for much longer. And the physical act of writing, the pen on paper, the slowness gave him time to think. And now there's a connection here to something he believes about technology and intention. Tarantino bans cell phones on a set. If you're caught with a phone, you're gone. He pushed back hard against the idea that people should watch films on their phone. When director Darren Aronofsky suggested that younger audiences would most likely watch on smartphones, Tarantino said, "That's the most depressing thing I've ever heard in my life." Cannes, he once said that digital projection was the death of cinema. And he walked out of a meeting at Universal when they pitched to release The Hateful Eight on iPhones. Now, you and I don't have to agree with all of that, but there's a principle underneath this. Tarantino believes that the medium matters. He believes that the physical format shapes the experience. Now, this is something that I personally believe. I believe that writing by hand forces a different kind of attention than, say, typing on a laptop. Bottom line here is he chooses the slower, more demanding format every time because he thinks the output is better for it. And when it comes to consuming other people's work, he applies the same idea. He's talked about his video archives era with real reflection. He said you went down to the video store, you looked around, you picked up boxes, you read the back of the boxes, you made a choice. There was commitment to that process. You had to think about what you wanted to watch. That kind of deep engagement is what feeds his writing. He reads pulp crime fiction, Raymond Chandler, Mickey Spillane, Dashiell Hammett, Charles Willeford. He reads book versions of film. And he published a book in 2022. It's called Cinema Speculation, which is a collection of essays about films he saw as a teenager in the 1970s. The book references over 900 films. He takes everything in. He'll process it slowly. Tarantino has his handwritten manuscripts and then the manuscripts from the Smith Corona, the typewriter computer hybrid. It's a physical system that slows the process down on purpose. He trusts that the slowness produces better work. All right, so we're going to talk about some takeaways here. Because if you're not a filmmaker, as I'm not a filmmaker, a lot of this can still apply to whatever it is you do, your work, running your company. It works for all of us. Okay, so the first thing, writing is a tool for thinking. So Tarantino didn't write the scripts to hand over to someone else. He wrote to figure out how he thought and what he thought. That vomit draft, that longhand. All right, if you're trying to figure something out, whether it's a project, a career move, a creative idea, write about it. Make it messy. Get your raw thoughts out. And I'm telling you, you'll find things that you didn't even know you were thinking about. Okay, friction can be a feature, not a bug. He has a slow process. He writes by hand. He types with one finger. That slowness filters out the weak stuff. If he doesn't want to retype a specific scene, he just cuts it. So think about where you and I could use friction in our own work. Sometimes speed works against us. So slowing down forces us to really look at what we're making. Build your education. Tarantino had no formal training. If you remember the previous episode with Robert Rodriguez, he also didn't have any formal training. He didn't go to film school. So these two guys have so much in common that they became friends. And this is just a reminder that you don't need someone else's program to learn. You just need to commit. You need to go deep on things that matter to you the most. And again, repetition, doing it over and over again, over a long period of time. This is the last takeaway right before anyone asks you to. If you're waiting for permission to start, for someone to hire you, for the right moment, you're going to be waiting a long time. Start the work. Write the thing. Make the thing. I'm telling you, it'll open doors. Quentin Tarantino's body of work speaks for itself. And here's what stands out to me. Quentin used writing to build his entire career. It wasn't the connections, those came after. And it wasn't luck, it was writing. He sat down with a pen and paper and figured out what he wanted to say. And he kept doing it, film after film, for over 30 years. The writing came first, everything else followed. Thank you for watching and listening. If you've come this far, please like this video and subscribe to this channel so more people could find this. This is Modernote. I'm Caesar, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.